Picture this. It might take a couple tries, but you get the lighter sparked and hold it steady. That familiar, kind of woody smell starts to fill the room. You take a breath, and the journey begins.
So what is it about this little green plant that has fascinated and honestly confused people for centuries? I mean, on a chemical, on a biological level, what is actually going on inside your body and your brain when you take that first hit? Well, today, we're gonna follow that journey, step by step.
All right, here's our roadmap. First, we'll look at the plant itself. Then, we're going to trace the path of its star player, THC, as it zips up to your brain. We will decode what the high actually is, dive into weed's super controversial history, bust some major myths, and then, finally, we'll put all the pieces together for the big picture. So let's start right there, with that first hit. What is actually in the plant that's about to be smoked? Let's break it down. This plant's story started way back in Central and South Asia, but man, it has since blown up into this massive global thing. And get this, there are over 700 different strains now, each with its own little quirks. But even with all that variety, the main story really comes down to two key chemicals, CBD and THC. Now that we know what's in the plant, let's follow those two chemicals on their lightning-fast trip from your lungs straight to your brain. Okay, so let's get a couple things straight about our two main players here. You've got THC, that's short for tetrahydrocannabinol, and that's the one that causes the high. It's the psychoactive, intoxicating part. Then you've got CBD, or cannabidiol. Now, it's also technically psychoactive because it affects your mood, often making you feel kind of calm or mellow, but it's not gonna get you high. Think of it as THC's chill, non-intoxicating cousin. Now, when you smoke, the whole process is incredibly efficient. I mean, it's wild. You inhale, the smoke fills your lungs. And from there, these millions of tiny air sacs called alveoli pass the THC directly into your bloodstream. And since your blood goes, everywhere, it reaches your brain in just a matter of seconds. The reason this all happens so incredibly fast really comes down to sheer numbers. The average adult has around 480 million of these little air sacs in their lungs. That is a massive biological network just waiting to absorb that THC into your system almost instantly. And here's a fun way to picture the surface area we're dealing with. If you could stretch out all the airways in your lungs, they would cover about 1,500 miles, which, for a little perspective, is about 13.6 million bananas laid end to end. It's just an unbelievable biological highway, basically custom built for rapid delivery. So the THC has arrived. It's reached its final destination. Let's crack open the skull, figuratively of course, and see what's actually happening in there. Once it's in the brain, THC starts messing with this huge network called the endocannabinoid system. Think of it as your body's own internal regulator for things like mood, appetite, and memory. THC basically impersonates your body's natural chemicals, and it fits into these receptors like a master key, kind of hijacking the whole system. Now, this affects different parts of your brain in different ways. In the amygdala, your emotion center, CBD might calm you down, but THC can overstimulate it, which is why some people feel super chill and others get paranoid. It also hits the basal ganglia and cerebellum, which control your movement. That's why your reflexes feel slower and you might talk a little differently. And then in the neocortex, your sensory processing gets a turbo boost, making colors seem way brighter and music sound absolutely incredible. But that slowing of your motor control has some really serious real-world consequences, especially when you get behind the wheel. And the data here is pretty stark. A study in the UK found drivers were almost twice as likely to be in a fatal accident. A Canadian study put that number at 4 times as likely. The message here really couldn't be clearer. Just stay off the road. And here's something else. Even after the high is long gone, the evidence sticks around for a surprisingly long time. As you can see, THC can be detected in your blood for up to 2 days, and in your saliva for 3. In your urine, it can hang out for up to a month, and in your hair, it can be found for up to 90 days. But hey, it's not all about slowing down. THC also stimulates the parts of your brain that make food taste, smell, and just feel way more intense, which of course leads to the famous munchies. So you get this dulling of negative feelings like pain or anxiety, combined with this sensory stimulation from the THC, and that creates that classic feeling of euphoria. That unique mix of effects, well, that's what we call the This feeling, this high, has fascinated and frankly terrified humans for thousands of years. But how did this plant go from being ancient medicine to this huge cultural battleground? Let's zoom out and take a look at its long and honestly very strange journey through history. So, cannabis and humanity? Yeah, we have a long, complicated relationship. It was used as medicine in ancient China almost 5,000 years ago. In colonial America, farming hemp wasn't just common, it was mandatory for making things like rope and sails. For most of our history, it was just seen as a really useful crop. But that all changed dramatically in the 20th century, reaching a peak in 1971 when President Nixon declared a war on drugs, and cannabis basically became public enemy number one. And that war? It's not cheap. It's estimated that the United States spends around $51 billion every single year on this. Just to put that number in perspective, with that kind of money, the US could give every single person in Canada over $1,400 just for, being good neighbors. A lot of that anti-drug campaign involves some pretty intense fear-mongering, and it created these myths that have stuck around to this day. So let's tackle 3 of the biggest ones you always hear and see what the science actually has to say. Okay, let's start with maybe the scariest claim of all, that marijuana rots your brain and causes psychosis. So first off, what even is psychosis? Well, it's a clinical term for when someone loses touch with reality. The main symptoms are things like hallucinations, seeing or hearing things that aren't there, and delusions, which are these strong, often paranoid beliefs that just aren't based in reality. So let's be super clear. Marijuana does not rot your brain. That's a myth, plain and simple. But the connection to psychosis, it's a bit more complicated. For the very small percentage of people, about 1 in 300, who already have an underlying genetic risk for a disorder like schizophrenia, heavy use of really high THC cannabis could act as a trigger, basically causing symptoms to show up earlier than they might have otherwise. Next up, the classic gateway drug theory. You know the one, the idea that smoking weed will absolutely, inevitably lead you down a path to harder drugs. Well, the truth is, yeah, some studies show a correlation. But here's the crucial context that always gets left out. Alcohol and cigarettes show the exact same gateway effect. And you know what's an even stronger predictor of future hard drug use? It's not another substance at all. It's a history of trauma. And finally, the big one. Is marijuana addictive? To answer this, we really have to understand the difference between 2 very important words. Okay, so about 30% of users might experience something called dependence. If you use it every single day, your brain just gets used to it. And if you suddenly stop, you might feel irritable, have trouble sleeping, and get cravings. Think of it like your morning coffee. If you don't have it, you feel off. But this isn't true addiction. For most people, these symptoms fade away after about 2 weeks. True long-term addiction is much, much rarer, though the risk is higher for people who start using heavily as teenagers while their brains are still developing. So, after all that, the chemistry, the history, the myths, what's the final verdict? What's the big picture here? The reality of cannabis is just so much more complex than the simple good or bad stories we're always told. Is it the devil's leaf? Of course not. But is it some harmless miracle cure-all with 0 downsides? No to that either. The truth is, like the source material says, even ice cream has its downside. The truth, as it so often does, is somewhere in the messy, complicated, nuanced middle. And that really leaves us with a final question to think about. If we accept that this plant is neither a demon nor a miracle, how should that change the way we talk about, study, and regulate it in our society?